A small group of unelected officials at around a massive conference table 8 times every year and make decisions that will determine whether you can afford to buy a house. These same 12 people influence how much interest piles up on your credit card bill every single month. They have a direct hand in whether your employer expands the business and hires more workers, or cuts back and sends people home. The overwhelming majority of Americans cannot name a single one of these individuals. And yet the choices they make reach deeper into your financial life than almost anything Congress votes on. They are the members of the Federal Open Market Committee, the decision-making body at the heart of the Federal Reserve System, and their fingerprints are on every dollar that moves through this economy. The Federal Reserve came into existence back in 1913, created by Congress after a brutal series of financial panics. It's convinced lawmakers that the nation desperately needed a central bank to bring stability to the monetary system. Congress handed the Fed 2 primary responsibilities that continue guiding everything the institution does more than a century later. The first mandate requires the Fed to promote maximum employment, meaning they want as many Americans working as the economy can sustainably support. The second mandate demands price stability, keeping inflation low enough that your money retains its purchasing power over time, rather than melting away. These 2 objectives, known collectively as the dual mandate, frequently pull against each other and force the Fed into difficult trade-offs that send shockwaves through millions of household budgets. The primary weapon the Fed deploys is something called the federal funds rate, which represents the interest rate that banks charge one another for very short-term overnight loans. That particular rate might sound obscure and irrelevant to your daily existence, but it functions as the foundation upon which nearly every other interest rate in America gets built. When the Fed pushes that rate higher, borrowing becomes more expensive across the entire financial system, which gradually cools off spending and eventually brings down inflation. When the Fed brings that rate lower, credit flows more freely throughout the economy, businesses feel more comfortable expanding, and consumers become more willing to take on debt. Right now, in economic history, we are living through one of the most significant transitions in Federal Reserve policy that has occurred in decades. The Fed recently cut interest rates for the 3rd consecutive meeting in 2025, dropping their target range down to between 3.5 and 3.75% after spending 2 exhausting years battling the worst inflation outbreak since the early 1980s. They also terminated a massive program called quantitative tightening that had been methodically draining trillions of dollars out of the financial system since the middle of 2022. These policy shifts create both genuine opportunities and real risks. For ordinary people trying to navigate their financial lives, grasping exactly how Federal Reserve decisions travel through the economy and ultimately land in your bank account, your mortgage statement, and your grocery cart provides an advantage that most people walking around simply do not possess. The Fed transforms your everyday life through 3 distinct channels, and we are going to examine each one closely. The first transformation involves what you pay every time you borrow money, whether that means taking out a mortgage, carrying a balance on your credit card, or financing a vehicle. The second transformation shapes what you earn on the money you manage to save and invest for the future. And the third transformation determines what everything around you actually costs. From the eggs in your refrigerator, to the gasoline in your tank, to the job security you feel when you show up for work each morning. By the time we reach the end, you will understand precisely why Federal Reserve decisions matter so profoundly, why the actual effects frequently run counter to what people instinctively expect, and what concrete steps you can take to position yourself intelligently as monetary policy continues evolving. When the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, most people assume that borrowing money just became cheaper across the board. They expect mortgage rates to drop, credit card bills to shrink, and car loans to become more affordable. This assumption feels logical, but it misses how the system actually works. The relationship between Fed policy and your borrowing costs is far more complicated than headlines suggest. And understanding that complexity can save you thousands of dollars over the course of your life. Mortgage rates are the perfect place to start because they affect the single largest purchase most Americans will ever make. The average 30-year fixed mortgage rate currently sits around 6.21%, down from 6.72% a year ago. That decline might seem like proof that Fed rate cuts are working, but the connection between the two is surprisingly weak. Mortgage rates do not follow the federal funds rate. They follow the yield on 10-year Treasury bonds. Because the typical mortgage gets paid off or refinanced within 7 to 10 years, investors who buy mortgage-backed securities care about what happens over that time horizon, not what banks charge each other for overnight loans. Something remarkable happened between September 2024 and January 2025 that proves this point. The Fed cut rates by approximately 80 basis points during that period, which normally would suggest lower borrowing costs everywhere. But the 10-year Treasury yield actually climbed by 90 basis points over the same stretch, and mortgage rates followed the Treasury higher instead of following the Fed lower. The Fed was pushing down while the market was pushing up, and the market won. Fed Chair Jerome Powell acknowledged this reality when he told reporters that housing will continue being a problem and that monetary policy cannot fix a shortage of homes. The housing market is caught in a trap that no interest rate adjustment can solve. Millions of homeowners locked in mortgage rates around 3% during 2020 and 2021. And selling their home to buy another one at 6% makes no financial sense for them. They are staying put, which keeps housing supply artificially low, even as demand remains strong. Prices stay elevated, regardless of what the Fed does. Research from major financial institutions suggests that mortgage rates would need to fall to around 5.5% before the housing market sees any meaningful increase in buying and selling activity. One analysis found that even with a 0% mortgage rate, buying a home would remain unaffordable in several major American cities simply because prices have climbed so high. The median home sold for $415,200 in October 2025. And monthly payments at current rates consume roughly 24% of the typical family's income. Credit cards operate on entirely different rules. When the Fed raises rates, credit card companies adjust their annual percentage rates within 1 or 2 billing cycles, passing the increase to customers almost immediately. But when the Fed cuts rates, those same companies drag their feet and take their time reducing what they charge. Rates rise fast and fall slow, and that pattern consistently benefits the banks at the expense of borrowers. The average credit card annual percentage rate reached 22.83% in the third quarter of 2025, with new card offers averaging nearly 24%. Just 3 years earlier, rates ran more than 6 percentage points lower. Someone carrying a $10,000 balance pays approximately $660 more per year in interest compared to what they would have paid in 2022. Total credit card debt across all American households now exceeds $1.23 trillion, the highest figure ever recorded. That number has jumped 60% since early 2021, driven by both higher prices that force people to charge more and higher rates that make paying down balances painfully difficult. The math of high-interest debt works against borrowers in devastating ways. Carrying a $5,000 balance at 21% while making only minimum payments would take more than 23 years to eliminate completely. Industry forecasters expect only modest relief over the next year, with projections suggesting the average rate might fall to around 19.80%, which still counts as extremely expensive debt by any historical measure. Car loans fall somewhere between mortgages and credit cards. Auto loans carry fixed rates, meaning your payment stays constant regardless of what the Fed does after you sign the paperwork. But the rate environment when you apply matters significantly, and new car loans currently average around 6.6%. The larger problem for vehicle buyers extends beyond interest rates to the prices themselves. Average monthly car payments hit a record $772 in November 2025. The core lesson across all borrowing categories is that Fed policy affects different types of debt in different ways and on different timelines. Assuming that a rate cut makes everything cheaper will lead you to bad decisions and missed opportunities. Mortgage shoppers should watch Treasury yields, not Fed announcements. Credit card holders should pay down balances aggressively, regardless of what the Fed does, because those rates will remain brutal for years. And anyone financing a major purchase needs to understand that the sticker price often matters more than the interest rate in determining what they can actually afford. The Federal Reserve does not only affect what you pay to borrow money, it also determines what you earn on the money you manage to save. For more than a decade after the 2008 financial crisis, keeping cash in a savings account was essentially pointless. Interest rates hovered near zero, and inflation quietly ate away at the purchasing power of every dollar sitting in the bank. Your money was not growing, it was shrinking in real terms, and there was almost nothing you could do about it. The Fed's aggressive campaign against inflation between 2022 and 2024 completely reversed this situation. By pushing interest rates to their highest levels in over 20 years, the Fed created the best environment for savers since before the financial crisis, yet most Americans have not adjusted their behavior to take advantage of it. High-yield savings accounts now offer rates as high as 5.00% annually. Compare that to the national average at traditional banks, which sits at just 0.39%. That gap represents thousands of dollars in lost earnings for people who have not moved their money. Consider someone with $50,000 in savings. At the high-yield rate, they would earn roughly $2,500 per year in interest. At the national average, that same $50,000 earns less than $200. The difference of more than $2,300 annually comes from nothing more than choosing a different bank. The money sits in an account either way, but one account pays you while the other barely acknowledges your existence. This window is already starting to close. The Fed has begun cutting rates, and banks follow that direction when setting what they pay depositors. Yields on savings accounts will drift lower throughout 2026 and beyond as the Fed continues moving toward its long-term target, which officials have indicated sits somewhere between 3.00 and 3.50%. The 5% savings rates available today will fade over time. Certificates of deposit offer a way to lock in current rates before they decline further. Certificate of deposit requires you to leave your money untouched for a fixed period, and in exchange, the bank guarantees a set interest rate for the entire term. The best rates available right now reach as high as 4.20%, and once you open that account, your rate stays locked, regardless of what the Fed does over the following months or years. This differs fundamentally from a regular savings account, where the bank can lower your rate at any time without notice. If you have cash that you know you will not need for 6 months or a year or longer, locking it into a certificate of deposit protects you against the falling rate environment ahead. A laddering strategy takes this approach further. Instead of putting all your money into a single certificate with one maturity date, you spread it across multiple certificates with different terms. When the shortest one matures, you either use the cash or roll it into a new, longer-term certificate. This gives you regular access to portions of your money, while still capturing the benefits of higher locked rates. The Fed also influences financial markets through its balance sheet, which matters for anyone with retirement accounts or long-term investments. During the pandemic, the Fed injected nearly $9 trillion into the financial system by purchasing treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities, starting in mid-2022. They reversed course and began pulling that money back out, removing approximately $2.4 trillion over 3 years. In December 2025, the Fed stopped this process and started adding money back into the system again. What does this mean for your 401k or your brokerage account? When the Fed drains money from the system, it creates headwinds for asset prices. When they stop draining or start adding, those headwinds ease. And the shift that happened in December 2025 removed one source of pressure on financial markets, which is generally positive for long-term investors. But trying to time your investments around Fed announcements is a losing game for almost everyone who attempts it. The smarter approach is to stay diversified, maintain a long-term perspective, and avoid making dramatic changes based on any single policy decision. The more immediate opportunity lies in your savings. Move your cash to a high-yield account if you have not already done so. Consider certificates of deposit for money you can afford to set aside. The returns available right now did not exist for most of the past 15 years and will not stay at current levels much longer. The Federal Reserve's third major impact on your life comes through the prices you pay for everything and the job you depend on to afford those prices. This is where Fed policy shows up every time you buy groceries. Fill your gas tank or wonder whether your position at work is secure. The Fed exists primarily to keep inflation under control, and the past few years delivered the most serious test of that mission in 4 decades. Consumer prices rose 9.1% in June 2022, the highest inflation reading since 1981. The cost of food, Housing, energy, and nearly everything else surged at a pace that shocked households across the country. The Fed responded by raising interest rates at the fastest pace in modern history, pushing their target from near zero all the way up to 5.25% in less than 2 years. The strategy was painful by design. Higher rates make borrowing more expensive, which slows spending, which eventually reduces the pressure on prices. The Fed was deliberately cooling down the economy to stop inflation from spiraling further out of control. That strategy largely worked. Inflation has fallen to 2.7% as of November 2025, sits much closer to the Fed's 2% target. But the Fed targets the rate of price increases, not the price level itself. This distinction matters enormously and confuses many people. When inflation falls from 9% to 2.7%, it does not mean prices are coming back down. It means prices are still rising, just at a slower pace. The damage from the inflation surge is permanent. Food prices have climbed 29.5% since December 2019, and those increases are baked in forever. When the Fed declares victory over inflation, they mean prices have stopped accelerating. They do not mean your grocery bill is going back to what it was before. Certain categories have been hit especially hard by forces that the Fed cannot control at all. Beef and veal prices jumped nearly 14% over the past year because the American cattle herd keeps shrinking while consumer demand stays strong. Egg prices soared more than 49% compared to last year. Driven by bird flu outbreaks that devastated laying operations across the country, coffee prices climbed more than 20% due to weather problems in growing regions combined with tariffs on imported goods. The Fed can influence overall demand in the economy by making borrowing cheaper or more expensive. But it cannot grow more cattle, prevent disease outbreaks in poultry, or change the weather in Brazil. Supply-side problems lie completely outside the reach of monetary policy, which is why certain prices keep climbing even as overall inflation moderates. Surveys consistently find that grocery costs represent the single largest source of financial stress for American households, ranking above rent, healthcare, and student debt. People feel the pain of higher food prices every single week, and no Fed policy will reverse the increases that have already occurred. The Fed's other mandate involves employment, and here the situation has grown increasingly complicated. The unemployment rate stands at 4.2% as of November 2025, which looks healthy by historical standards. But that number hides troubling trends beneath the surface. The economy finds itself in an unusual position where overall growth continues, but job creation has slowed dramatically. Companies are not laying off workers in large numbers, but they have also stopped expanding their payrolls. Economists describe this as a low-hire, low-fire environment, and it creates real problems for anyone looking for work or hoping to switch jobs. Job openings have fallen to roughly 0.95 per unemployed worker, down from 2.0 at the peak in spring 2022. That means there are now slightly fewer open positions than there are people looking to fill them. A sharp reversal from the labor shortage that defined the post-pandemic economy. Younger workers have been hit particularly hard, with unemployment among those under 25 rising noticeably. Employers are predicting the weakest job market for new college graduates since the pandemic year of 2021. The Fed faces a difficult balancing act between its two mandates. Cutting rates too aggressively could allow inflation to re-accelerate. Keeping rates too high for too long could push unemployment significantly higher. Trade policies and tariffs have made this balancing act even harder by pushing prices up through channels that have nothing to do with monetary policy. The Fed is caught between forces it can control and forces it cannot. Inflation remains above target. The job market is softening. Tariffs keep adding upward pressure on prices. Every decision the Fed makes over the coming months will ripple outward into your cost of living, in your employment prospects in ways that are difficult to predict but impossible to escape. Everything we have covered connects back to a simple reality. The Federal Reserve operates in the background of American life, making decisions that most people never follow. And yet those decisions land directly in your wallet whether you pay attention or not. The Fed cannot control everything, cannot build more houses, cure bird flu, grow more cattle, or undo the tariffs that push import prices higher. It operates within limits, often caught between its two mandates. And fighting inflation threatens jobs and supporting employment risks, reigniting prices. But within those limits, the Fed moves enormous levers. It sets the baseline for what borrowing costs throughout the entire economy. It determines whether your savings earn meaningful returns or waste away to inflation. It speeds up or slows down the broader economic engine that creates jobs and drives wages. The policy shifts happening right now will continue playing out over the coming years. Rates will move. The balance sheet will expand or contract. Inflation will rise or fall. Employment conditions will tighten or loosen. Each shift will create winners and losers depending on how people are positioned. You cannot vote for Fed officials or lobby them to change course. But you can make decisions with full awareness of the environment they create. You can choose where to keep your savings, how aggressively to pay down debt, when to lock in rates, and how to think about major purchases. These choices compound over time into real differences in financial outcomes. The Fed will keep doing what it does. The question is whether you will keep ignoring it or start paying attention.